Welcome to the Mad and Crip Theology Podcast. It's so great to be here with all of you today. And today we are excited to be joined by two guests who've written for us for the fall 2024 issue of the journal. So we're here with Micah and Io. And before we get started, we just have one announcement, which is our usual one, which is we're always looking for content for the Canadian Journal of Theology, Mental Health, and Disability. So if you have anything kicking around like art, stories, poetry, academic articles, anything you're doing in your teaching or your work with faith communities, we would love to hear from you. So you can submit to us directly to our emails or also through the portal on the journal on the website. So now we'll get started.
Right. So we'll actually hand it off to Aya and Micah to introduce themselves. So let's hear first from Aya. Can you tell us about yourself and your work?
Oh, it's so hard sometimes to know how to introduce yourself when you do a
Yeah.
lot of different things. I am an author, an academic, and an artist, and a performer, and I think I'm just trying to be a well-rounded human being. Really, I do things that inspire me, and recently I've been studying far right ideologies to try to get my head around that, I think, as a way of coping. So thankfully, this is all kind of aligned with my work. And so I bring my artistic practice into academics to try to understand why people do what they do. And I
Yeah.
think being somebody who works in mad spaces, kind of with more of a peer support approach, I think this really helps me to bring in a more equitable understanding of why people might make bad choices in their lives and bring a compassionate lens to try to understand what we can do about that. So
Hmm.
that's me.
Great. And we're grateful to have you here. And Micah, can you tell us about yourself?
Hi, I'm Micah Perez. I think nowadays I would describe myself as an occupational therapy entrepreneur. So I do lots of different things, but mostly I work with neurodivergent people, so specifically autistic and ADHD. Um, with or without chronic health conditions as well. And I help them through neurodiversity affirming occupational therapy. Um, yeah, I think that's probably the quickest way I can describe the work that I do at the moment.
And we're so glad that you're here with us at 5 a.m. from Australia. So
Yeah.
thank you so much
Thank you.
for getting up early to be with us.
No worries.
All right, so I think we'll dive in now to some of the questions that we prepared for you. So, Micah, the first question that we wanted to ask you about your piece that you wrote for the journal um, is about how you write beautifully around the relationship between trauma and grace. So, can you talk to us about the journey of discovery and how did you recognize such moments in your daily life? And maybe you can also just give our listeners and viewers just a little bit of an idea of what the piece was about, too.
Um, Yeah, so my piece was kind of doing a bit of an exploration and reflection around um, my identity now as a neurodivergent Filipino Australian Christian who throughout my whole life essentially have experienced recurrent trauma, different forms of trauma, and I would call them like little T. kind of traumas. There have been some bigger ones, but essentially that has kind of shaped a lot of my life experiences and my identity. And it's been, I suppose, like an emotional like roller coaster for me. And it has really informed, I think, the work that I do now, and how I view lessons and blessings in life. And so that piece kind of put out of me over multiple sessions, but I just wanted to be able to put down in words a little bit um, of how recurrent trauma and my faith have kind of mixed in together to really form, I suppose, like that experience for me. And I wanted to try to see, what were the lessons like through that. And maybe other people could resonate with that as well. So I was really honored to be able to have that piece published. So that really meant a lot to me. So thank you guys for that opportunity. And then in terms of recognizing those moments, I think when I've been able to take the moments of quiet, of solitude, whether that be through meditation or through prayer, or even just reflecting on my life and on the lessons and the blessings, that's where I've been able to really understand, I think, and really be able to receive grace in those moments. And yes, it's been really hard sometimes to reflect and to really confront like what's happened and how I've been shaped by those experiences. But I always have believed that there's a reason for everything, and there's a lesson to be learned in every trial. And sometimes the hardest moments for me, I've been able to reframe them as, kind of like a baptism by fire, where it's through those moments that I'm really growing, and being able to have a deeper relationship with God, which is incredibly humbling, but incredibly difficult as well.
Thank you, Micah. That's great. In your piece, you encourage people to think about their passions and their mission. And so we wondered where your passion is leading you these days, and what are you finding important or rich in your life these days?
Yeah, so I was really inspired by the book called Ikigai. And I think for most of my life, I've been praying about, what's my purpose? God, why am I here? Kind of thing. And I think that has changed through the chapters of my life. But now, at the moment, my passion really is empowering people who can resonate with my personal journey. So being neurodivergent, so autistic ADHD, which is, I think, the understanding of this type of neurodivergence is still very much emerging and very much misunderstood. So it's a wonderful kind of challenge to be able to go, look, hey, this has been my journey and I see you and I've walked on your path and I continue to walk on your path. Let's journey together in this. And specifically for me, I have channeled that into the work that I do, so the business that I run, called Neurodiverse Therapies. And so I specifically provide neurodiversity affirming occupational therapy for neurodivergent individuals, for that neurotype, I should say. And I acknowledge that there's many forms of neurodivergence. So this is really, such a niche kind of area. And that's really important to me, to be able to do that, and to be able to hold up that mirror for people who can resonate with my journey and say you're not alone, and you can do this. So that's been really powerful and really humbling to be able to do that now at this point in my life. And so what's important to me right now is to live with purpose, is to live with intention every day. I think that's even more important when you spend many days feeling unwell as well. And also that being unwell, it is not your whole identity. And I'm sure that people with chronic health and disability can resonate with that. It becomes so much of your time becomes about your health and your disability, and you can lose yourself, your true self, in that, through that lens. And that can be incredibly heartbreaking and just incredibly debilitating in and of itself. But if we have a purpose and we have a clear intention with our actions in every day, that can really help. And that's definitely helped me in my journey, and in my being able to live authentically now. So that's really important to me, and being able to live a life and work in alignment with my core values and my faith, whether I'm working with people who share the Christian faith or not. And so those core values that I have are freedom, function, and empowerment. And again, a lot of neurodivergent people seem to resonate with that values-based kind of work. So that's really important to me, and I try every day to do that.
And as you were talking, I was also wondering what has it been like for you to find that neurodivergent community?
I still feel like really fresh, like I still feel really new to it. But I kind of, I think for me it's been really validating, and it's been exciting for me. It's been challenging as well, but yeah, I kind of I feel like I've found my tribe, and I really feel like I belong now in this community, and so that's incredibly validating. Yeah.
Well, tribe finding is like the best thing that could ever happen to a person, I think. Yeah. When you really feel like you're really seen.
Mm-hmm.
That's so beautiful.
Yeah.
Yeah. So thank you so much for sharing. I was just gonna, we're just popping the questions in the chat as we go here, and it looks like Zoom's not letting me put everything in, so I'm just gonna do it in two parts right now. But we were just gonna invite you, Micah, to read a portion of the article that you wrote for us, for our listeners, and then I can ask you a follow-up question.
Okay. Sure.
To make sure I got the right section here. Yes, okay. All right. So maybe I'll just invite you to read it there. Can you see it okay in the chat?
Yeah, just my old eyes.
Or would it be
Okay.
easier if I read it? Or you got it?
It's fine. I think I've got it. I just need to adjust my screen.
Okay, cool. I don't think your eyes are that old.
I feel like they are, particularly when I've had these lenses for a long time.
They look young to me.
Long time.
It's
Thank you. No, I'm one of those like old souls in a young body type thing. So most days I feel like I'm 80 years old, but
Me
Yeah, me
too.
too.
okay. The more our healthcare systems subdivide a person into separate body parts using a medical model of health and disability rather than viewing a person as a whole being and using a holistic and biopsychosocial model of health, well-being, and disability, the more we will continue to fail to improve the health and well-being of people like myself who have complex needs. The more we force neurodivergent people to mask and camouflage their neurodivergence to appear neurotypical, rather than embracing the beauty and necessity of neurodiversity and neurocomplexity, the more we will continue to fail to support people like myself to thrive and flourish in daily life. The more we ignore and neglect the spirituality of individuals, such as those of Christian faith like myself, the more we will continue to discriminate against those who have different beliefs and values to us. The more we remain ignorant about the intersectionality between theology, health, and disability, the more we will continue to subject entire communities to trauma, intentionally or not.
Yeah, so a powerful and very clear um uh like list of the things that we need to do. So we were just wondering, how might we practice differently in healthcare, education, or faith communities in light of the insights that you've raised?
I guess I've been able to reflect on this for a long time, and what I have written is like my ideal healthcare kind of system, right? And I don't know, I don't know like when when that will happen. I pray and I hope that will happen, and we are on our way to that, regardless of where we live in the world. Um, but I think it, and it's a really hard question, right? And I love that question, and thank you for asking that. But I don't think I have all the answers. I think I can provide a very kind of shallow preliminary kind of like insight into that, because it's not going to it's going to take like a really systematic overhaul,
Yeah.
and like a really like massive culture shift for us to be able to do that, but which is why I was so inspired to write to write, and I really hope it resonates with people who read that as well. um but I think in the work that I do, for instance, what I really tell myself is, but you're working with humans, Mike, and never forget that. So we have to return, I think what I suggest is returning to our humanity, remembering that we are working in flawed systems, but we are ultimately working with people, and people have stories, and people are whole and complex, and they're not just the body parts attached to a head. So I think we need to remember that, and then I think we need to really tap into our empathy and build emotional intelligence when we're working with people. We need to remember that everyone has a story to tell, and it is most likely not going to be like our story, and so that requires compassion, as well, and it also requires us to be able to humble ourselves and put ourselves in a position where we don't have all the answers, and we don't know 100% of everything that we're doing every day, and being curious about that, and also just if we don't know, like asking for help, or asking the question,
Yeah.
being curious when we work with people rather than being judgmental. And I think finally it's about I think it's also about just being honest and transparent in our communications, and just actively listening. So rather than talking at people, it's really like listening, carefully and thoughtfully. being able to regulate ourselves so that we can be really present, and really attend to the person that the people that we're working with. So I think that's my very shallow preliminary attempt to kind of start to answer that question.
Not shallow at all. I think it will take a collective wisdom and power to live into a different way. In your piece, you talk about masking. Oh,
Oh, sorry, Miriam, I put the wrong question in.
you talk about masking, which is common term in neurodivergence. So we wondered what it felt like to mask and to unmask, and how can we support each other, one another in that unmasking.
So I'm sure it's different for everyone in that
Yeah.
experience, but for me, masking felt really safe. And masking helps me to feel like I have a sense of control, and it also is protective against rejection, because rejection sensitive dysphoria really sucks. And it's really painful. So I laugh when I'm nervous, so that's why. But it's not funny. Rejection sensitive dysphoria, it's definitely serious. But for the longest time, I felt like that was my only option, and how I could best function was to hide behind a mask. And I think going through life, when you try to present your authentic self, when you try to tap into that, and the response around you is negative, and when you're bullied or teased, discriminated against, it forces you into this shell, and you kind of go, well, okay, that's not acceptable, but people don't like that, and we all want to be accepted and liked, right, by our peers. So that for me, depending on who I was with, I would determine what mask I would put on. And then it got to a point where I didn't know then who I was under all of these masks. I got so good at masking. And then I got really confused, and really anxious, and really depressed, I guess, about that. So who am I really? And, crisis of identity. So then I got to a point where I realized, well, this is not healthy and this is not sustainable, and it doesn't feel great. So, and then praying about it, I knew that it wasn't the right thing to do. It's not what God wants for me in my life. So then became the journey of unmasking, and kind of trying to rediscover who I am as a person, who I was always meant to be. And in many ways I still mask, depending on where I'm at, because I unfortunately don't feel safe to unmask 100% of the time. So I'm at a point in my life now, late 30s, where I can feel safe to unmask maybe about 80% of the time, which is really high, and a lot higher than many neurodivergent people. But this is what I wish for them, and this is what I wish for my clients, is that they can get to a point where they know and they feel free to be themselves so much that they can also feel safe to unmask most of the time. And that's a real goal, for for a lot of my clients, is that living authentically, and even just like knowing how to do that. So how can we support people? How can we support each other to unmask? I think it really comes from doing what you can to create a safe and trusting relationship or environment so a person can feel that they can be themselves. Being authentic, so that you're not a hypocrite. And even I find myself, for people who have really had quite traumatic experiences, it's giving them permission. So, saying, I accept you as you are, I see you, and I am inviting you to be completely yourself, whatever that means, whatever that looks like. And I invite you to also give yourself permission. Giving permission, it seems like such an easy thing, but actually it's really hard when you've experienced trauma, because your sense of agency and power have been taken away from you so much, that you're always externally, looking for that. And I think there's a real power and real grace that can come from being able to give yourself permission. So that's sometimes, we cover that, we do that in sessions. And the amount of times that a client has just, they start off the session and their shoulders are like right up to here because they're so tense and anxious, and we go through that, and and I say, I want you to, the things that I said before, and then I just see them like visibly just relax and go, oh, okay, this is going to be different. You're different. Like you get it. Okay, I can. All right, I'm going to try it. But then, but after that, there's the resistance, that I see of, oh, but this is so new for me, this feeling, and I don't know what to do with this. So it really is about having that open dialogue and really fostering uh, a genuine connection with people and creating that safe space.
Yeah, I love that. And I can imagine you sitting with your clients and just what a beautiful gift that must be for them to be able to be with you and to be able to finally relax.
Thank you.
What a
Yeah.
beautiful gift. Yeah. All right, so the last question that we have for you, Micah, I'm putting the right one in this time, is would you be able to tell us about experiencing a mix of emotions like grief, pride, or otherwise when you're reading your own work?
Yeah, it's strange, right? I don't know if it's like watching yourself back, but reading yourself, it's for me. For me, it's can be an out of body experience. Like, did I write that? Like, where did those words come from? Like, what? Who is this? What? So I think that's yeah, it almost feels like it's not me the first time, but then I reread things and tend to overthink it anyway. So when I read things back that I've written outside of that editing phase, I kind of feel lots of different things. And this piece particularly made me feel many things. I had to reread it and kind of leave it in and get back to it many times because I got so emotional writing it and then reading it back, because it was really cathartic for me. And I and it was just like the most intense kind of experience. And I think, I mean, at the time it was like really difficult, but the emotional, I suppose, process that I went through, I think I needed to, and I needed to get the words out. And I'm glad that I did. And then it was just kind of like, oh, I think it's not something that I should keep to myself. I think it's something that I should share, and if it's meant to be shared, then it will, land somewhere. And then I kind of prayed about it, then, and here we are. So I never thought, when you submit things, you kind of hope, but you never, and then I just kind of forgot about it after I submitted it. And then, so I think that's the power of prayer and the power of lived experience, and the power of having an authentic message that resonates with other people as well. So I just really thank you again for this opportunity. And like I said, I'd never thought that I'd be here talking about a piece that I wrote.
We are so grateful and so grateful to hear about your thinking since writing this too. And we will turn to Io now for some time, and then there'll be time for you both to talk to each other. But we're so happy to have your work in the journal. And our first question are about how your drawings feel like they're almost holding hands with the spirit world. There's so much intimacy and touch and grief stitched into them. So we wondered if you could talk about what sacredness means to you in this creative process.
Yeah, I mean, there's so much. Like, I think for me, drawing was one of my first outlets. And when, so on my mom's side, my mom is Métis and very spiritual, kind of like a flower child, like very like in her feelings and very sort of mercurial and creative. And I grew up really poor, and both my parents are working class, didn't have like a lot of education or opportunities, but they're both brilliant people. And so when I was a kid, and we would have problems, and my mom just wouldn't have the resources to really know what to do to support us or give us guidance. Mm-hmm. And she would say, that sounds like a really big feeling. Like, why don't you put that into a drawing? Mm-hmm. And so I think that really taught me at a young age that drawing could be something that, well, like while I'm doing it, it's sort of processing how I'm feeling through the shapes that I'm finding and making on the page, that it's like transforming me in a way. Like, it's like I'm drawing, but I'm being drawn. I don't know, it's hard to explain.
Yeah.
It really felt like every time I did a drawing that I was going through a process of understanding myself and what I was feeling. And so a lot of intensity got put into the drawings themselves, where sometimes it starts out like uglier, right? And rough and really confused. And then I also identify as neurodiverse. And so if you see the drawings, they're like really very meticulous in terms of details. So when I was drawing those specific drawings, some of them took me months of like 6-hour days. I'm just drawing all the time.
Wow.
At the time, I was intermittently going through homelessness. I had a lot of trauma in my life, and a lot of the interventions that I had in terms of like healthcare or like support were not helpful, because I think this like go-to of medication sometimes helps people and sometimes doesn't. And for me, it didn't really help me. when what I really needed was to be heard and
Mm.
like given a purpose and like understand, why is all of this happening to me, and what can I do about it? And so I think the process of meticulously sitting and like rendering these images was also me affirming my value and my beliefs and my spirituality, because I'm dedicating all this time to something that I think I can make beautiful.
Mm.
And that beauty, it's sort of like taking the ugliness that I feel and the harm and the grief and everything, and finding the most beautiful form for that to take, that would be like looking at this pain that I'm experiencing and feeling like I don't know, my ability to render it in a beautiful way, it just made me feel like no matter what I was going through, I'm powerful because I can make what I'm going through beautiful.
Mm. Mm.
Yeah.
I love that. I mean, I think the beauty and the emotions and like just like so much comes through in your art. I was when you submitted it, I was like blown away. I'm like, oh my God, they're submitting to us. Like this is amazing. So thank you so much. And one of your pieces ended up being on our cover for the fall. So many people really like sent messages saying how much they love that cover image. So it has really moved a lot of people. So thank you for doing what you do with your art. It's so beautiful.
That's wild. I mean, I'm glad to hear that, but it's funny because I've never had an art show before in my whole life, and I've been
Oh,
to tons of art shows. So it's interesting, right? Because like a lot of when I share art with people, like my individual friends and stuff, they'll be like,
yeah.
"This is great." But if you don't have the language and if you don't
Yeah.
have connections, it's like hard to ever do that professionally. So I've never made
Yeah.
money off my art. It's always just been a passion for me. And
Mm.
I guess like it is its own reward in the end. So yeah, I just find it interesting that it connects with people like that, and I really appreciate you saying that.
Yeah, for sure. And like I think I mean when you were talking about how you do art, that's how I feel about writing. Like when I was younger,
Mm.
I would always write and read. Like that was like my kind of escape and my own thing
Mm.
because I also grew up poor. So the library was like where I went to like hide. And so yeah, I think like as I get older, I've been learning how to just like write to write instead of feeling like pressure to write to sell things because that can also kind of I don't know, creep in and maybe wreck some of the beauty
Yeah.
or the intention of why we're making things. So I totally resonate with what you're saying there. Um, Miriam, is it my turn to ask a question? I can't remember.
Sure.
Oh, okay. All right. All right. So the next one we have for you, Io, is you write about the repair of touch as both powerful and dangerous. What kinds of touch, like physical, emotional, spiritual, have shaped you most in your art and life?
Uh, I I think I am an animist, I think. If you had to put a name on something, I really connect a lot with the land and with my experiences in nature.
Mm.
And I really think that humans are also nature, and that, I mean, that seems fairly obvious to me, but not obvious to everybody. And I think that these moments of being in nature and being with other people and having these sort of times that you spend together, I think being touched is like, I think we're touched even when we're not physically touching each other. We're touched in the way that people like move us and change us and transform us into different people, even when we don't know them, even when they're just saying words and you hear it over the internet or something.
Mm.
Like, I think computers are also natural. I think that everything is nature, and that, it's just manifesting in different ways, in different forms and endless transformations. And so I guess like touch is tricky, right? Because you can be transformed in a negative way and a positive, like
Yeah.
hard to say, if you take everything as a whole, like what is good and bad when you can't chunk it up into like little pieces, right? It's like sometimes bad things bring a lot of good, in the if you let it shake out, if you let it unfold, it becomes good, and then there's something that comes out of suffering that's positive in the way that like you choose to take it, you choose to like you are touched, and then what, and then what do you do with it? How do you embody that experience of being changed by something? And like, so that's where it's tricky. It's like being touched is a profound thing. Like being in proximity to somebody puts us in this very vulnerable place, right? It's like they can say stuff that hurts your feelings. They can violate your boundaries. They can disrespect you, but also somebody can change your life. They can heal you. They can hold you. They can see you. So I think, for me, it's always relationships, and a lot of my art is about relationships and about people being together and having kind of spiritual experiences together. And so I felt that my friendships and my relationships with people have been, because I didn't really have the opportunity to focus on a career because I was a little bit too messed up to really like be successful in that area. So I felt that is for me, I decided not to feel bad about stuff like that and to be like, well, if this is my lot, like what I'm going to do is I'm going to focus on what makes me feel important in the world and what makes me feel healed and like where I can make the biggest difference. And for me, that was always relationships. So my friends and my chosen family became really like what got me through those moments and what allowed me to actually end up having a career eventually, right? Like, and without that, I don't think I would have made it through as relatively whole as I am now.
The significance of community. And that leads into our next question, actually, so that's awesome. So your works involve these moments of intimacy with community. And how do you imagine art as a portal or offering in these different queer platonic communal relationships?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting with like queer platonic intimacy because so much of like we've got this like heteronormative, it seems like that's the only thing, right, that's really valid. And I haven't found that to be the case, and I don't think a lot of people find that to be the case. And so like, representation, I think, is something that I've found that you can do yourself. If you're not seeing yourself represented in the world, you, as a creative person, you actually are a portal to represent things, that you see, and there's something really affirming about, like, even though a lot of my art is, my drawing is very solo, like I'm sitting around by myself drawing all day in like my apartment, but what I'm drawing is really channeling those moments when I am with my community and how that makes me feel like a real person, like the way that my friends see me, even if I'm not professionally successful or wealthy, and I'm really feel invisible in like the big world of like,
Mm.
you know, big time, like people being like successful and whatnot. I did not feel successful for most of my life. But when in the eyes of my friends, I feel loved. And I feel like those moments were so real for me that I wanted them to be permanent in a way, you know, and there's this kind of dedication to the art that makes it also feel like I'm like worshiping that like intimacy, and I'm like taking it and channeling it and capturing it in a way where I'm not controlling, I'm not confining it, but I'm like unleashing something that wasn't represented before, and it was just private and it was fleeting, and but it changed me, you know, and it touched me. And if I can put that into a piece of art, then it feels like, you know, that's me deciding that this is what I value. And I don't care what anybody else says, and I don't care what's out there, what people want, or what is going to make me successful. I really felt so strongly that I needed to take the things that I cared about and have them be reflected in the world.
Well, that's really cool. And I love this idea of you being a portal, and like you being like brave and showing other people so much of yourself through your art. So thank you so much for that. Okay, the last question that we have for you is about you mentioned being drawn to the sublime, something that overwhelms and transcends language. So what's your relationship with the unspeakable, and how does it show up in your drawings?
I mean, I think that's why you see grief in the drawings, I think.
Right.
I think a lot of trauma is a very private experience, and part of like the nature of trauma is that it's overwhelming. It's like, ugh. Like like for myself, it's like I went through so much in my life that it's really hard to put into words. And like when I finally only got therapy after I'm 42, so last year, and only after contracting cancer. So, and when I first started in therapy, finally, with someone who didn't care if I wanted medication or not, they finally agreed to see me without me taking medication, which I didn't want, and it doesn't help me. I started to heal. And at the beginning of therapy, I was so disjointed that I couldn't put words together that made logical sense. Like there was no narrative for what I had been through that could help me to explain who I was, or like, why am I acting so weird? You know, it's so then people are constantly misinterpreting me and being like, oh, this person's kind of like off, or like something's wrong with them, and then constantly having this cycle of being rejected and excluded, and then it worsening the trauma, and then it kind of goes on and on. And I found like that it to like take this time to really center and sit with that like unspeakableness, like the it's just like for me just kind of feels like sometimes just this like overwhelming just feeling embodied like pain that I can't explain, that takes me over, that fragments my thoughts, that makes it hard to connect or like even really realize like what I'm doing or where I am. So I think the drawing practice, like going back to like being a kid, this was like my way to reach out from that place, to be like, whoa, I'm like in just unspeakable pain. I don't know why. I don't know what the shape of it is. And to like sit in front of like a blank sheet of paper and find a shape can like it for me, it just helped me to like begin to mold the pain and not necessarily into like a coherent narrative that's like, oh, this is what happened or this is what it means. It was like to create this like very flexible container where it's like it doesn't have to mean anything specific, but this is what represents this experience that I'm having right now, and to choose to represent that experience as something sublime. I felt at the time and now that that was really, really important because it's like trauma's bad, right? Like trauma's bad. It feels bad. It hurts. But
Yeah.
it's also the thing that touches you. It's the thing for me in my life that kind of cracked me open, that like sort of forced me to contend with who I was, my life, what I was doing, the choices I was making, the people I was with, and who I thought I was. And I guess that, it's like when you crack open like an egg, is like you're gonna just fall everywhere, right? You need some kind of shape to it. And people do that in different ways. And for me, the first way that I learned how to do that was drawing.
Yeah. Well, thank you. And thank you for sharing your gift with us. This has been such a rich conversation, and before we wrap up, we wanted to have a moment where you could ask each other questions or talk to one another about anything that's on your heart. So
I guess I'm curious, Micah, when you're sitting with people and you find that there is that resistance, like how to people being themselves or finding that like balance in the like that like relational place, like how do you keep yourself like steady in that? Like how do you find your way to that place of like continually seeing people in that place of unsteadiness?
Thank you, Io, for that question. It's like it's incredibly challenging in the moment, but it does take practice, and that's why being able to be really present, like focus my attention on the work that I'm doing in the now, in that moment with that person. It takes practice, but it's a learnable skill, just like self-regulation, just like emotional regulation. So have to do a lot of I have to do a lot of self-work, and that's an ongoing process, I think, for all of us, right? So that I can show up and do and be there for my clients and do the work, and it's about them, not me. The only time but also it's an organic process, and it's collaborative. So I find that I share a lot of myself in my work because that's how I work now. I used to be very much like, oh, I'm a professional and you're my client, and never there shouldn't be kind of like a mix of that. But I find that doesn't really work with neurodivergent people. Like we are so social, and we are so like deeply like empathic, but the way that we show it and we experience it tends to be very different to neurotypical people. And so that's really shaped how what I do. And then sometimes it is when I'm with someone and I'm getting distracted, or I'm starting, it's something they've said I'm really resonating with, and I have to, in that moment, remind myself that it's not about you, Micah, it's about them,
and
or I'll do something in my head to go, okay, yep, great. Now, be present, return, or whatever it is that I need to prompt myself to be able to do that. Okay, Micah, table that, that's fine. Or sometimes there'll be a moment where I go, oh, okay, this is really the time to then be able to share something or resonate. Or when I can see that someone is struggling with words, then that will be the moment that I go, okay, I can see that this is really difficult for you at the moment. Do you mind if I share, something of myself or give you an example? Maybe that will help. And so that's been really powerful for people who, as you said before, sometimes it's really messy, right? Like trauma really messes you up. And then because trauma is stored in the body and the mind, it does fragment. So a lot of the time you can't, it takes a long time and maybe a lot of therapy to be able to piece together some kind of story that makes sense to someone else, let alone yourself. So being able to have different ways for people to communicate and being okay with that and navigating through the messiness and giving people time and space. I think that's ultimately how we can be neuroaffirming with a trauma-informed lens is to say, okay, you don't have the words, that's okay. And then doing mind-body kind of work or helping someone return to their body like in a safe space. And that may not be in the scope of your practice, but it's recognizing those things. And also I think as therapists, as clinicians, we have to be really clear about what we can and can't do, what we know and what we don't know, and not overstep boundaries. I see that happening so much is we try to do everything and be everything for people. And that's dangerous. So I am very clear about my boundaries and I'm very clear about how I work and how I don't work. And ultimately it's a choice then for the person. So yeah, and I'm so glad to hear that you finally were able to find people that really got you and that really just understood your needs and didn't try to force things on you just because this is, we're not what the evidence is telling us. And I'm really passionate about that in healthcare. And I think you talk about trying to find the goodness in the bad, and being cracked open. And I think I have been so affected by the way that I've been treated as a patient. And so I can't possibly do that as a therapist myself. So my negative and positive experiences as a patient now shape who I am as a therapist. And I think people who are in a lot of pain can really appreciate that. And when you've been through a lot of stuff, when someone is just talking at you as opposed to no, I have also been kind of where you've been and I get it, and that's where we start. So yeah, so I'm really passionate about that in my work, and I use reflective practice all the time to adjust, so that I'm meeting people where they're at. Yeah.
Thank Micah. And do you have a question or thought about IO's work?
Yeah, so how old were you, Io, when you realized that you had this gift and this passion for drawing? Because it seems like it's been like a constant for you in your life, and sounds like it's been incredibly empowering for you in your life's journey, and to have that there and to be able to develop that as a skill and as a real strength of yours. So I just want to validate that you've in your life, despite all of the trauma and the difficulties, you've been able to really very powerfully attune to harness that strength and that passion of yours, and it seems like part of that is what's gotten you through. So I really just want to validate that for you. But yeah, how old were you, young were you when you realized that you had that gift?
I think it's like, my mom saved some things that I had done as like 6 months old. And
Wow.
like this was an early example of why I might be neurodiverse as well, because I used to take a whole page and I would fill it with tiny circles in lines
Yeah.
of circles, like obsessively, and I would do both sides, and then I would spend my time. I just love making little marks, I guess, and I would doodle, outside of every like every notepad that I ever had, and it was like one of those things that, when you find something that you can do that people esteem and that they appreciate, that it's like can be such an incredible and affirmative activity. It's like I do this thing, it feeds the people around me, they appreciate it, it feeds me, and it's like this wonderful exchange. So at some point I had a hustle. I would like do drawings of Disney characters for people in my class, and I would like give them drawings and stuff. So it was always this thing that I felt just like I can do that. I don't know why, I just can. And I loved it so much, and it gave me a focus and something that, in a life where you're not getting a lot of affirmation, it can be really nice to have just one thing that you're good at and that people enjoy. So, yeah.
That's amazing. Yeah, thank you for that. That's really cool.
It has been such a joy to get to meet both of you today and to hear your stories. Miriam and I are so honored that you shared with us today and all of our listeners. So for our listeners, if you want to check out Io or Micah's work, you can head over to the journal to see Io's art and read Micah's writing. So thank you so much for being here. We really appreciate you.
Thanks so much for having us. It's been such a pleasure.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate you all and all of your efforts to bring all of this together. So thank you so much for the opportunity.